This week on Full Circle Florida, the tragic ICE shooting in Minnesota. An agent shoots and kills a U.S. citizen, a mother of three. And the question is ICE now out of control? Will it be an election issue in the midterms? Dr. McManus is here on the fallout. Then your voice this week on the Bucs' future. Bowles stays, Grizzard goes. What about the fans? I captured your voice this week in Tampa. Plus, Venezuela oil and the reality check on what the White House is spinning. All right, time for the Baker take, not to be confused with our quarterback here in Tampa, Baker Mayfield. Different game here as we bring in Presley Baker. Presley, what is the real plan here? I mean, the White House says that this was about security and drug trafficking, but now they're talking like we might have to run Venezuela for a while. What is the end game here? Are we stabilizing a country, trying to control it? And by the way, where have we heard that before? Sounds familiar. I was in Iraq in 2003 when debathification occurred. I witnessed our military leaders hand over a brick of cash to locals who I guarantee you ended up probably shooting at our guys. So this thing can go sideways real quick. You've had a few days to digest this. What do you think?
Well, I'm just as scared as our founding fathers are of foreign entanglements. So I completely understand the kind of outcry from Americans about getting this involved in a foreign country. But I do think President Trump, when he gave terms to the new interim president, Delcy Rodriguez, made it pretty clear that he doesn't want to install anybody new as long as she's going to follow his conditions. And his conditions are kicking out Iranian, Cuban, and other operatives from other hostile countries that don't like America and aren't favorable to American interests, and that eventually that she'll facilitate a free election. And that all came out in a Politico article this morning. And I'm hoping that that's the extent of it. I know Trump said he's not scared of boots on the ground, but I think he's trying to avoid that as long as Delcy Rodriguez follows what interests we have in line for her.
Yeah, trying to do this with a scalpel and not a bat. Did the U.S., though, just rewrite the rules? This move did not go through Congress. Other countries are calling it illegal. How long can the White House operate like this without any real pushback from Congress?
Yeah, even with covert action, there is supposed to be some notification to Congress, and obviously Congress has the declare war power. But what Marco Rubio and what we're hearing coming from the White House, even though there's been no real official statement of their entire legal rationale, is that this was a law enforcement action and not a military action, and therefore Congress didn't need to be notified. And if Congress was notified, that it could have put American lives in jeopardy of the military men and women that were supporting that law enforcement action, those federal officers that were trying to enforce federal law by executing the arrest warrant.
Marco Rubio, the Secretary of State, he keeps spinning this like this naval blockade is going to be enough to put pressure on Venezuela to do whatever we want. But last I checked, the guys with the guns, the generals in that country are still in charge. They're running the show unless we've got boots on the ground and people in their faces to tell them to do what we want. How do we really know that they're following through on things that we need to get done? And, these motorcycle gangs that are going around aren't causing chaos in the streets.
So I think we're going to have to see how the country as a whole reacts to this change in power and how Delcy Rodriguez is different from Maduro and how she chooses to cooperate with U.S. officials, especially in the face of cartel opposition, which is not an easy thing to do by any means. So I don't think we really know what it's going to be looking like going forward, and the actuality of us actually putting people on land in Venezuela.
You've got Maria Machado watching this whole thing from Norway, the Nobel Prize winner, and you wonder, she won the election. She says she wants to be the president. Trump is basically saying the president essentially saying, look, we got to get order first, organize things. The election is not something we can do right now. So that's kind of not on the totem pole just yet. But if you're keeping score at home, what are you going to be watching for next? What are the big pressure points to watch? The street protests, the military, the oil market, or the politics, and how this is being received, not just by those in power in Congress, but by the voters, the American people, and the whole idea of what happened to America first. Which one blows up first if this does go, not even if it goes sideways, but if it drags on? for the president?
Well, I'm a firm believer in that 90% of the choices made by Congress members in Washington have to do with their reelection, and you see some of their true colors when they're not running for reelection for president and for Congress in the same way. So I think the opinion of American voters will come into play, but I think we'll need to see, like you said, how the oil market does, because I know Vice President Vance put out a statement about how there was American assets in Venezuela that under the Maduro regime were nationalized and basically seized from American companies, and that we're just regaining kind of our old assets and property. And obviously there's some pushback on that from the other side, but I think we'll have to see how the oil market works out, and ultimately how other countries respond to this action by President Trump, because I don't think anybody wants Maduro, at least Western nations want Maduro to have maintained his regime or that person to stay in power. So I think we'll have to see what kind of blowback happens on the world stage.
I will say, I don't know if you blame the national media for this or the White House communications apparatus for not communicating sort of the pretext to why this guy was such a bad guy and why he needed to be removed and what the national interests for the U.S. are. You know, when it comes to removing him, that seemed to be missing up until the point that this happened. And now we're sort of almost reverse explaining this to the American people as we're reporting on it in real time. But when you talk about the geopolitical side of this, the message it sends to the rest of the world, when the U.S. does something like this, now you think about, okay, what does that mean for China and Taiwan? What does Cuba think? You know, Rubio's already intimated that Cuba could be next. Mexico and the drug cartels, even places like Denmark with Greenland, do they assume that power is whatever the biggest guy in the room says it is? And that can also get kind of tricky.
Yeah, well, I don't think there's any doubt that Trump is the biggest guy in the room currently. I mean, he's the leader of the free world, and he's proven that he'll put his money where his mouth is. And I don't foresee him grabbing up any other leaders of any other countries, because I think that most of them will understand the message here, which is that if you're going to promote anti-Western and anti-American ideals in the Western hemisphere, that there will be consequences for it. And I think that Trump simply said that with this action.
All right, Presley Baker with the Baker Take, as always. Thank you for your insight. Really appreciate it. Next, Bowles and the Bucks, and your voice. Next. Welcome back. Todd Bowles is staying with the Tampa Bay Buccaneers, but the offensive coordinator, Josh Grizzard, got let go this week. If you're keeping score at home, that is 4 OCs Baker Mayfield has had in 4 years. So, what do you, the fans, think about the team's future? Here's your voice. My friend, we're looking for Bucs fans. Just reaction to the season?
Disappointing.
The Tampa Bay Buccaneers, they break my heart. But you know what? Football is life, and life is about ups and downs and moving forward, and that's what we're here to talk about. It's your voice. Let's go. I'm Paul. Nice to meet you. How did you think about how the season went down?
Honestly, I felt like they could do better.
We are looking for Bucs fans. Panthers fans. We got a dart right through the stomach. I can't even walk right now. Do you think any changes need to be made with staff, players, anything like that?
Definitely more teamwork, and the coach needs to be a little bit harder, you know?
Would you stay with Bowles?
Bowles? Yeah, I'll say Bowles.
We're excited for next year.
Any changes would you make?
There's got to be some changes. You know, you can't lose 7 out of 8 games. I think we lost 5 in a row.
Would you make any changes?
Bye, Todd Bowles.
Bye, Todd Bowles. Really? All right. Are you optimistic about next year?
Sometimes.
Más o menos?
Yeah.
It's a weird situation because it gets cool and then it gets hot. Kind of like the Bucks. Go ahead, brother. What do you think about the Bucks?
I don't care about the Bucks. Go Lions.
Go Lions. Okay, all right. We got a biker. We're asking people about the Bucks, how the season went down.
No, actually, I'm an Eagles
You're an
fan,
Eagles
and they
fan.
lost last night, so I'm mad at the Eagles.
See, that's the thing about missing the playoffs is now you have to talk about other teams. Do you think this is a one-season hiccup? Do you think we can come back and be the team that on paper we are? Or do you think this is a correction?
I'm hopeful. that we can put this thing back together. There's a lot of great players on the Bucs.
Would you make any changes going into the next season?
Probably.
What about Todd Bowles?
I like Todd. He's a disciplinarian, but like I said, I've seen some questionable calls and game-changing calls. And I think that's a problem.
It was a great start. We kind of fell flat halfway through.
I mean, you can't throw the baby out with the bathwater, but in the same token, I think it's been disappointing for the athletes too.
Yeah.
I mean, the whole team's disappointed. So they're going to make some changes, and they're going to have an off season to think about it.
Thank you. Appreciate it. Happy New Year. Next, Minneapolis outrage over that deadly ICE shooting, plus Venezuela's oil shakeup and what it means for your gas prices. Welcome back, everyone, here to Full Circle Florida. Let's bring in our political analyst, Dr. Susan McManus, back here with us this week. Let's talk about what happened in Minneapolis. Not easy to watch. But on the political side of this, is this what Trump voters expected from tough immigration enforcement? And politically, does it risk backlash that starts tearing at the country's social fabric and marks a turning point in the tolerance when it comes to the public for how ICE is operating in American cities so aggressively?
Well, let's sort of start from the beginning. When ICE began, the really well-known plan was to go after illegals who had committed crimes in America. Americans were really on board with that. But the further it gets into the implementation and going after others that don't have that criminal background, that's where you've seen the public stop and say, well, let's take it a little bit slower, or let's not be so quick to judge. We've had several people that have been held up that are actually, citizens that they've had to let go. So things like that. As to the impact in the short term, it was very interesting, because what happened, as soon as it happened, America divided into two camps: the ones who believed the woman who was killed, and the others who believed the ICE agent was legitimate in his actions. Of course, now the more we look at things, you have another element that we don't see often. Social media now has 20 or 30, I'm exaggerating, different angles that people can look at this particular situation, this accident or shooting or whatever, intentional or not. And so it again confuses people, and they start to wonder, well, how can I really believe much of what they're telling me, because there's nothing sure. This has a danger for politics.
Right.
Because if you promise something, people are going to judge you on it. But obviously, so much of politics is the context changes and people's attitudes change. So will it have an impact? Probably.
Right. Well, I mean, President Trump campaigned on getting rid of the gang members and the thugs and the criminals off the streets. People were on board with that. Maybe even people who didn't vote for Trump supported that after he got elected. But if there's such tension between ICE and, like the protesters, this was bound to happen. I don't think anyone's actually shocked that this actually did happen. They're probably surprised it hasn't happened already. And the question is, if it happens again, this becomes something of a political liability, because it's one thing to, I guess, go after people that have a criminal record. It's another thing when moms start getting shot in the face. That doesn't look good for anyone.
But it also has a different impact as to whether it's a heavily Republican, or a heavily Democratic state. So the political context is going to make a difference. The issue is going to play differently depending on the politics of a congressional district and also the states.
All right, let's talk about Venezuela, because that was the other big story of the week before what happened in Minneapolis. Marco Rubio, the Secretary of State, he's juggling Secretary of State duties, national security, Venezuelan oversight now, and upcoming Greenland talks with Denmark. Why the heavy focus on the Southern Hemisphere? Is this unique to Marco Rubio?
No, it's not. For several decades now, there have been a lot of studies, people who look at security, people who look at economics, all the above, have been seeing the investment or intrusion, however you want to look at it, of Russia, China, and Iran investing and spending lots of money in these countries in Latin and South America that don't have a lot of funds. They've been building things that are tied to those countries' security. We're very close to these countries and with drones now. In other words, for a couple decades, both for economics and for security, people who study that region have been begging Washington to do something about it.
Why don't they explain that? Because they said it was about drugs. It doesn't seem to be about drugs because Trump pardoned the guy in Honduras. It doesn't even seem to be about oil completely, because it seems to be more about take oil that was being sold to China off the table, control the southern hemisphere. This seems to be more of a chess match that they're playing between China and Russia, and having more control over America's backyard. Why don't they sell that to the American public instead of the oil part?
I have been stunned that they haven't said that, and that's where I think Rubio comes in. Let's talk a little bit about him. He grew up in Miami. He was the son of an immigrant. He lives in those communities, those exile communities. He served them as a legislator, then a congressman, now the Senate. And in the Senate, let's not forget, he had major committee assignments. What? National security, right, foreign affairs, and intelligence.
I mean, yeah, he was made for that role. All right, Florida legislative session starts soon. I hate to give it only 20 seconds, but property taxes, is that the #1 goal going into this session?
That plus a lot of other relief for homeowners, business owners, people who travel in and out of the state. A lot of focus on how to make the economics of Florida better for people living here.
Do you think they can actually deliver on this promise, or could this get politically messy for the governor and the legislature?
The property tax is going to be politically messy, but ultimately I expect that there will at least be an amendment on the ballot for people to say yay or nay to that has some type of property tax relief.
All right, Dr. Susan McManus, as always, appreciate you being here. Thank you. We turn next here to the reality check on Venezuela and the oil President Donald Trump says will be coming to America. But when and how exactly? Let's reality check what's the hype and what is possible and what it could mean for prices here at home. Here's my conversation with energy and gas expert R.T. Trevino. All right, R.T., thanks for joining us. You know, you called this thing weeks ago. You were on the show and you said this was the thing to watch out for. So here it is. But we're getting this rosy picture that we're just going to, turn on the spigots in Venezuela, that oil's going to flow, that we're going to inject it into the U.S. market. Gas prices are going to drop. Everything's hunky-dory. We'll produce 3 million barrels a day and take over a founding member of OPEC and have more oil that we can imagine. And it's, Texas Tea Party in America again. But Chevron's the only U.S. company, as you know, that's currently there on the ground. The infrastructure has reportedly been dilapidated and neglected like everything else in that country. Safety's an issue. No company wants to send their workers to a place that's not stable. And it's not as simple as saying we're going to get oil from ground to market. So what's the reality check on Venezuela's oil situation? And what do you think our intent is? Are we really going to just take over a country, get all their oil, and kind of be like Pirates of the Caribbean here?
It really is not as simple as turning the spigots back on. I do feel like we have a president that is telling it like it is. Instead of us going into a country and saying we're going to give it everything we got to make sure these people can take care of everything from day one, he's learned from past presidents that it's going to take time and due diligence to actually turn Venezuela back into a prosperous nation that's also a positive partner to the world. And what we're looking at is probably about 18 to 24 months of actually redoing that dilapidated infrastructure to actually then be able to produce maybe 1 million to 2 million barrels of oil a day.
Bottom line, 3-4 years from now, we could see flat $2 a gallon at the pump?
Well, here in the great state of Texas, we're at $2.05 a gallon of gasoline and just under $3 at diesel. So it is a strong possibility we could see a national average at $2 in the next 3 to 6 months.
All right, R.T. Trevino, thank you for your insight. Appreciate it. Full Circle Florida continues right after this. Thanks for watching us here on Full Circle Florida. We hope you'll join us again here next week, and make sure to add our free 24/7 streaming news channel, Tampa Bay 28+. Have a great week, everyone.